My name is Ken Folven. I'm the Senior Director of Quality Assurance for Clear Capital. And like most of you, I'm a certified appraiser. I'm really excited to kick off a new webinar series, An Appraiser's Guide to Quality Appraisals. And as Bridget mentioned, this webinar is the first of our four-part series and is focused on understanding the impacts of revision requests. All right, and then in this webinar, we'll be covering the impacts revision requests can have not only on the appraiser, but all parties involved with the transaction. We'll wrap it up by addressing a few of the common requests, along with sharing some best practices that we've identified over the years. And that said, I'd like to turn it over to my co-host, Heather.
Thanks, Ken. Hi, everyone. I'm Heather Kahn. I'm currently a senior business analyst, but I've had many roles in my 12-year career at Clear Capital. I'm also a certified residential appraiser. I'm super excited to talk to you today about the impact of revision requests. So first, I'll kick it off with some of the benefits of this webinar series. One is to stay connected. If you're not working in an office full of appraisers, it can be a challenge to stay connected to the industry and the customer requirements that are just constantly changing. Particularly over the last couple of years, we've seen a ton of changes in our industry, and it looks like that's not going to change anytime soon. So these webinars are really going to help you stay up to date on all of that industry news. Increase your chances of an expedited review. So we know your time is valuable and post-delivery requests can be time consuming. Once you submit your report, you probably don't want to see it again. And so we're going to provide some suggestions that will increase your chances of an expedited review. Consequences of delays. Post-delivery requests not only impact your time, but have downstream impacts on the AMC, the lender, and really most importantly, the borrower. So we're going to talk about some of those. And then improve the credibility of your report and trust in our profession. As appraisers, we have a responsibility to promote the public trust. As our industry continues to change, we need to show the value and reliability of the appraisal process to really demonstrate that the appraisal timeline and the values we provide can be trusted. So our next slide here, we'll talk about the different webinars we're going to have in these series. Today is understanding the impact of revision requests. Next up is tips for reducing revision requests that top performing appraisers swear by. This is going to be an interview with some high performing appraisers, both in terms of quality and as well as efficiency. So that'll be a really exciting conversation. And then how to avoid common conventional loan revisions and how to avoid FHA revisions and reconsideration of value requests. These webinars will provide insight into the issues we see most often with those assignments. They'll be really interesting. The registration links are in the chat, so just scroll up and follow the link to sign up for those. Okay, now on to our topic today, impacts of revision requests.
All right, yeah, let's dive in. Let's get a better understanding of the impacts revision requests can have. All right, so there are obviously a lot of different unintended impacts revision requests can have. So let's take a few minutes to review some of the most significant. First is turn time. Probably one of the most critical impacts that everyone is most concerned about is turn time. So let's talk a little bit about the impacts revisions can have on turn time. To give you an idea, on a report that has not yet been delivered by an AMC to a lender, it's not uncommon for those requests to add an additional 2 days to the overall turn time of the process. Where it really gets lengthy is when the lender themselves issue a revision request. Those types of requests can average anywhere upwards of 5.5 days of additional time added to the appraisal process when the lender themselves have to request a revision. And I'll explain a little bit more of that here shortly. Then we have productivity. I mean, let's face it, I'm an appraiser. Again, most of you guys are. No one likes to see revision requests come their way. They slow you down. They can be painful sometimes, time consuming, and we understand that. So they do have an impact on your own productivity. Additionally, future work. The number of revision requests you receive could impact your volume. It's really not uncommon for all different types of AMCs and lenders alike to track the frequency at which appraisers receive revision requests. So those are some of the big impacts that revisions can have on the overall process. So let's move to the next slide, and let's talk a little bit more about turn time impacts. And this is really a simplified visual of the revision request process between an appraiser, AMC, and lender. And just wanted to review this with you just to help give everyone a really good understanding of all the different steps that come into play with a revision request. So if you follow me along here along the top, once you as the appraiser submit your appraisal report, it generally goes to an AMC. That AMC will complete some level of a review in most cases. And if a revision is needed at that time from the AMC, that's going to get pushed back to you as the appraiser, who will then review that request and submit a revised report, and that will go back to the AMC. That's the process that I'm referring to that sometimes can take on average 2 days to complete that cycle. Where it really gets delayed or lengthened is when the AMC delivers the appraisal to a lender, but the lender requests a revision. So in that case, when the lender is requesting a revision, in most cases, that's going to go back to the AMC. The AMC is going to review the request from the lender. Then they're going to put it in their own words. They're going to push that back to the appraiser. And then you as the appraiser are going to review that request. You're going to resubmit your report. That's going to come back into the AMC, who's going to review that revised report, making sure that everything that was requested was addressed. And then they'll approve the report and ultimately send it on to the lender. And that's the part of the process that can take anywhere up to 5.5 days to complete that whole cycle. So really a time-consuming part of the process when our lenders have to request revisions from the appraiser. So obviously, one of the things we try to do is avoid that when at all possible, and work with all of our appraisers to minimize that from happening.
For Ken, I don't think
go ahead.
Thanks. I don't think we can stress that point enough. Underwriters have extra time right now, and they are using it to go through your reports more thoroughly. So be sure you take a moment, read over your report before submission, make sure I's are dotted, T's are crossed. Now's the time to take that extra step, because those underwriters are spending more time on those reviews.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're seeing that in the environment today where we're seeing just underwriters spending more time on that. So yep, good point to call that out for everyone.
Borrower impacts. So in our day-to-day, it can be easy to forget about the significance of the appraisal process to borrowers. Buying a home or even just refinancing can be a really stressful time for people. Just look at how stressed out this couple is in the photo. Being able to rely on a timely valuation can make a big difference. As you know, the appraised value can sometimes trigger a renegotiation, and buyers have to build this into the process so that they can avoid rate lock expirations. Today's market, the interest rate variance of just a few weeks can have a serious impact to borrowers. I mean, that's real dollars and cents in their pocket. And so this is a really meaningful process to them. Meeting your committed delivery date and addressing revision requests quickly can really ease that stress for borrowers and maybe cheer up the couple in this photo. Future work. Many AMCs track pre and post customer delivery requests, and high rates of either can impact future orders. Revision requests are costly not only to you as the appraiser, but also to the AMC. And lenders will require that the AMC select appraisers with high levels of quality. And they'll audit us to make sure that we're selecting appraisers with high level of quality. Now, how do we measure quality? Back to the revision rate, right? And so since those are so highly correlated, the revision rates really do impact the frequency of the solicitations you receive. Something we don't talk about a lot is that many lenders also track performance by appraiser. And so high revision request rates can impact your ability to work with a specific lender, either through watch lists or exclusionary lists. So we really want to do everything we can to avoid these altogether. Next, we'll discuss the best way to address your revision requests if you do receive them.
Yeah, let's get into it and talk about some of the best practices for addressing a revision request. So here's a few key points if and when you receive a revision request. As we've covered, there are many steps in the process and delays can have significant impacts. Addressing these requests quickly can really make a big difference in improve the experience for everyone involved.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Ken. And it's also helpful if appraisers update everyone in the process. You can do that either through the AMC platform or via email, but providing those updates really keeps everyone informed, reduces stress, and reduces phone calls you'll receive asking where the report is.
Yes, absolutely. I think everyone would appreciate fewer phone calls and status requests on these. So yeah, good point on calling that out. Secondly, be sure to fully address the request. On the quality assurance side of things, it's not uncommon for us to see requests that are partially addressed, and we have to go back to the appraiser for additional commentary on the request. So be sure that you're fully addressing the request. And remember, the report needs to be credible on its own. So a tip would be to restate the request or provide answers which include the problem. And I would always encourage everyone to remember this, that the borrower and lender see the comments in the appraisal report. So even though you could be frustrated by the request or it seems obvious to you, keep it professional. It's better, always keep things professional and provide answers that you'd be comfortable showing your state board. It's a good rule of thumb to have, is just that your appraisal report could be given to the state board at any time. Not suggesting that it's wrong, but it could land in their hands at some point. So please make sure the commentary that you're providing would be something that you're comfortable with everyone reviewing. And then last but not least, ask questions. If you disagree with the request or have questions, you need clarity on what's being asked, call the AMC. It's better to discuss directly rather than going back and forth between appraisal submissions with what you think they might be looking for. So pick up the phone, call, send an email, contact them, and you're likely better off getting some direct answers at that point. And I can say here at Clear Capital, we have a team paired with staff appraisers to help out with any questions or concerns that you might have on these types of reports. And that's how we'll try to help you out with revision requests, but use those resources if and when you need to.
Okay, so we've covered the impacts of revision requests. Let's talk about how to avoid them altogether. So common frustrations, read the report. I've heard that from appraisers, I've read it in blogs, and I have thought about it when in reference to my own work, right? There are a few things that tend to cause the most frustration. So I want to talk a little bit about that. The appraiser will explain what adjustments were made. The report reader is often looking for how those adjustments were made.
Yeah, Heather, I'd like to just point out on this, it's something that I think that's really important on this topic is oftentimes we do see appraisal reports that reiterate the obvious. And what I mean by that is it's not uncommon for us to see an addendum from an appraisal that says, this is an example, I adjusted $5,000 because comparable number 2 is inferior in condition. And what I mean by restating the obvious is we already know that from reviewing the sales comparison grid. We can see that a positive or negative condition adjustment was applied. What the reader really wants to know, and like Heather said, is how was that adjustment made and why was it made? Why was the comparable inferior or superior in condition. And don't leave that part out. That's a really important piece that I think oftentimes does get missed, but be sure to ask yourself why and how. And I think if you can address those questions, that will certainly help you out.
Awesome. That's such a good point, Ken. Thank you for expanding on that. We also see that appraisers will provide pages and pages and pages of boilerplate commentary, and they're doing that to try to avoid a revision, but a lot of times this backfires because the report reader can't find the information that they're looking for. And all of that commentary really just increases the likelihood of inconsistent commentary, which in turn causes a revision request. And so I think avoiding that boilerplate commentary really makes a difference. And then the letter of engagement. I know it can be lengthy and sometimes a bit daunting, but lenders have investors who require specific commentary in certain situations. And so they have to make sure that all of those requirements are met for financial reasons. All righty, let's dive a little bit into the details on some of this. So first off, I just want to point out a fun fact here. 90% of the revision requests that we at Clear Capital receive are deemed warranted. We do take a look at those requests coming in from lenders, and sometimes we're able to push back and say, you know, it looks like it's already addressed, but more often than not, the lender has a point, and there is something that needs to be addressed in the report. So let's get into some of these details and figure out how we can avoid some of these more common revisions. One is reading the letter of engagement. So again, we know it can be lengthy, but the customer specific information is often at the top of the LOE. Anything specific to the report is usually top of the LOE. So aim your focus there. Be sure you're paying extra close attention to that specific section. You know, down towards the bottom is usually a little more standard. And then if the subject property has a unique feature, like an accessory unit or a private road, it's really helpful to keyword search for those in the LOE. So if the subject has an accessory unit, for example, control find for ADU, an accessory unit, use those synonyms, see if there's anything special required for anything that's just a little bit out of the ordinary when it comes to the subject. And that'll really make sure that you're covered and you avoid those requests down the line. And then, of course, the LOE doesn't cover everything. So use PAP, FHA, Fannie Mae guidelines. Be sure you stay up to date on those industry requirements. And a really great way to do so is attending the webinars like this one. So awesome for doing that. And then organize your commentary. So remember that there are a lot of different eyes on your appraisal report. And when there is a lot of commentary that is not report specific or isn't well organized, it's really difficult for the reader to find what they're looking for. A lot of the boilerplate commentary that I see is part of the limiting conditions or the scope of work. And that's all pre-printed in the report. There's no need to restate that again in an addendum. And it just kind of muddles up the report and makes it hard to find the information that's really important, the information that the reader really wants to see. And so try to streamline that as much as possible. And you know, the more boilerplate commentary you provide, the higher the chance of the conflicting comments. I see a ton where appraisers will provide their statement of exposure time in 3 different places. And then it'll be different in those 3 different places. And so that causes a revision. So avoid duplicating commentary because that's a really big trigger for inconsistent commentary.
Yeah, Heather, I was just going to point out real quick that I think teaser alert for our next webinar, but we're interviewing a couple high performing appraisers and we've already had some preliminary discussions with them. And a common theme there is less is more. So to Heather's point, keep things simple, impactful certainly, but less certainly can mean more.
Yeah, absolutely. Comparable selection and adjustment commentary. So this is where we as appraisers spend the most time writing, and it's where the reader often spends the most time. I really recommend explaining your comparable selection process just 2 sentences really helps the reader understand why you selected the comparables. And if there are sales that you considered but later discounted, include the addresses of those sales, because that really helps you avoid a reconsideration of value request down the line. It only takes a minute up front, and it saves you a ton of time on the back end. And then just again, touching on what Ken mentioned, explaining the why rather than the what. Make sure that you explain how that adjustment was determined, why that calculation was made in the first place. We can see in the comp grid what was done, so we don't need to restate that. And again, it's just another opportunity for inconsistent commentary. And then just kind of a personal tip, I always recommend organizing commentary by adjustment rather than by comparable. So what I mean by that is if you say bathroom adjustment and then explain how your bathroom adjustment was calculated, $5,000 per bath, or avoid that, right? Say like bathroom adjustment was made based on matched pairs analysis, and then condition adjustment. Comp 1 received a condition adjustment because flooring was updated, cabinetry was updated, what have you. That makes it really easy for the reader to align the adjustments that they're looking at with what was done in the comparable grid and get those answers that they're looking for. When appraisers organize their commentary by comp, comp 1 had an adjustment for X, Y, and Z. Comp 2 had an adjustment, for X, Y, and Z, because that again just restates a lot of the same facts, and it really makes it easy for inconsistent commentary, especially when updates are made to the comp grid. And then reviewing the pre-delivery rules. So oftentimes software providers have checks. Highly recommend running those, including spell check. And then many AMCs will have a check, a soft stop that is just a reminder or things that they see most commonly in the revision space. So I think those are always really, really good. And then lastly, nail the simple stuff. If the lender, the reviewer has something they have to come back for, they might throw in the nice to haves. Whereas if they don't have to go back, it's all just nice to haves, they probably won't send the request at all. So on the next slide, Ken's going to give a sneak peek into some of our most common revisions.
Great information. Yeah, so as we've talked about, this first webinar is intended to provide insights into the revision requests, not only have on you as the appraiser, but also the AMC, the lender, and ultimately the borrower. Our future webinars are going to cover and give detailed advice on the most common requests we see here at Clear Capital. So these revision requests that you see here, these categories probably look familiar to some of you. So we hope that you'll join us in an upcoming webinar to hear interviews with high-performing appraisers where they can talk about some of their best practices, and more from Clear Capital Quality Assurance team members with additional guidance on how to avoid these types of revision requests. All right, and just in closing here, we've got a couple minutes left, so just wanted to, if you're give some additional information on some available resources to everyone. So if you're not currently on our panel and are interested in joining, please use this information here to learn a little bit more. We've also provided a few relevant industry links that you should be sure to familiarize yourself with and use as a tool when completing assignments. We've got a link to Kubicasa here, so you can, if you're interested, you can learn more on how to create an accurate digital ANSI-aligned GLA floor plan. We've also have a few links here, industry links from Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and FHA on their different handbooks or selling guides. So really would encourage you to familiarize yourself with these industry links. You'd be surprised at how often when you do have a question, the answers can be found by doing a keyword search in some of these selling guides. They're very powerful. So if you aren't familiar with them, you aren't using them on a daily basis, I would encourage you to save them as a favorite and leverage them whenever possible.
And as a reminder, we will be sending out the recording of this webinar. If you have any questions, please drop them in the Q&A right now. And if we don't get to them with the Q&A, feel free to send us an email, which will be showing on this next slide.
All right, awesome. We'd like to thank you for joining us today and hope you found the webinar helpful. Certainly it was intended to understand the impacts of that the revision requests can have on the appraisal process. So thank you for attending, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. We really appreciate taking the time to learn more about the impact of revisions, and be sure to sign up for our next webinar. As a reminder, it's an interview with a couple of high-performing, high-producing appraisers. See you next time.